All right. Hello, I am Akila, and this is,
Christina.
and we are going to go through how to follow a CALLA lesson plan. So we are students at ORU, and we are a part of the ELL program, which means English Language Learners. And so our specific unit and lesson plan is really geared toward English language learners. So what's a CALLA lesson plan all about? The procedures. So there's 5 things that really are the heart of the CALLA lesson plan. First one is the preparation. And so in that, you are really taking into account, what do my students already know? What knowledge are they coming in with? What skills do they already have that we are going to be able to build upon in this lesson? Next is the presentation. How will I present it to the students? In practice, how will I help them model this out? How will I help them perform these skills? And then evaluation and assessment is just really getting to know, did they actually learn what it was meant for them to learn? You know, in a CALLA lesson plan, just like any other lesson plan, we set objectives. So did they actually grasp the objectives? And then expansion is, how do you drive it home? How do you put it in perspective that they can actually remember it later and take it with them and apply it to their life? So expansion can look like discussion questions at the end to really also it's still kind of assessment to assess, did they really grasp it, but also it gives them something to take home. So it might be like a parent take-home sheet or something like that. So here's a question that many ask when it comes to lesson plans. How many lesson plans are there? So for this specific unit, we did a thematic unit plan. And so in that, we assessed that our students would need 5 lessons. And some of those lessons are broken down into 2 days. So we really took into account that English language learners need a little bit more time just to kind of grasp the understanding of the lesson, opposed to just shooting some information out there. We want to make sure our students are really learning. So it's 5 lessons. And this specific lesson plan that we'll show you is themed on food and culture, and to really honor the cultures that will be in our classroom. So lesson 1 really goes through students getting to know each other in a fun way, but it also helps them learn about the different cultures in the classroom and how to even just to know what kind of foods come from these cultures. Something simple to get the lesson started, something fun that's going to really get them thinking about learning and excited about learning. And then the lesson plan will guide you in the structure of your class day. So anytime you have a lesson plan, it's going to help guide you throughout your day. And this is what it'll look like. So with each lesson plan, first thing that is very important is to look at your lesson plan so that you can know what you're doing for the day. So you should have prepared it weeks or maybe even months in advance, and some of you maybe even years in advance, depending on how long you've been teaching. But with that, we'll have the lesson topic at the top with the objectives. And in the CALLA plan, we use 3 different objectives. We have the cognitive, we have the socio-affective, and we have the linguistic objectives. Now, your cognitive is really going to go off your Bloom's taxonomy, at what level your student should be performing. You know, should they just be remembering it, understanding it, applying it, analyzing it, right? You'll keep kind of assessing which level in the Bloom's taxonomy. So with that cognitive objective, you will use that. And then with the socio-affective, what social skills should they be able to display, right? And then with your linguistic, which of the 4 language domains are we really going to harp on in this lesson plan? Is it going to be reading? Is it going to be writing? Which one of those 4 skills are you really trying to make sure your student is grasping in this lesson plan? And the next, another important thing is your materials. On your lesson plan, you will map out in bullet point form what materials are needed for this lesson. It's important to have your materials prepared in advance so that the lesson for you and your students go as smoothly as possible. If that means going out and grabbing things, if that means creating slideshows in advance, making sure you have everything you need prepared for your lesson way in advance. So the day of, you're not looking like a deer caught in the headlights. And then the assessment that will be used will be following that. So after you have your materials, you'll talk about what you're going to do to assess that your students have actually grasped these objectives, have actually learned what it is they should be learning. And assessments, remember, they're not just tests or quizzes, but they can be simple things to just get an understanding of where your students are. And then following the assessment, the time allotted for the lesson plan. And that is so important because you need to remember, especially in our context with ELL, English language learners, that the time that you take for your lesson plan is really important, even though some of the students may be advanced and some may not be as advanced. It's going to take them time to be learning through language, right, and learning about language. It takes more time to learn a new language on top of learning the academic lingo. So we want to make sure we are giving our students that time so they can be successful. And then there's going to be a quick overview of the lesson plan with the procedures, and that's where the CALLA part really comes in, and it's from you've written down, preparation. Again, what do my students already know? Your presentation, your practice, your evaluation, and then your driving it home. What does it look like for them to be able to discuss it, your expansion, right? And so you'll have that listed in your CALLA lesson plan so that you have a good idea of where you're going. And then next are your very, very detailed instructions that should be step by step, so that if a substitute teacher came in and picked them up, they would be able to actually implement your lesson. So in this part is where you want to be the most detailed. Everything else is kind of bullet points. Also, your objectives should be very detail oriented. And then last but not least, you have additional materials needed that will be included in a folder. So for this one, we have a folder set aside that it coordinates numerical order, like with the lesson plans of what all materials are needed. So if we have digital materials, anything that needs to be printed, any presentation things, they will be there. And so that is kind of how to go through the lesson plan and what's going to be included on that lesson plan.
Okay, so what's first? When you are teaching a lesson plan, the very first thing that you should be doing is having a review of what you learned last class. This allows the students to really think about what they learned last class, and it's a really good indicator of, did they actually learn last class, or are they having a hard time remembering? Also, lesson plans build upon each other. So if they have a really good understanding of last class, then that will help with having background knowledge with this current lesson plan. And so just make sure that you have a review of some sorts for them to think about what it was last class and what they're going to do, and then announce what you're going to be doing in the class before you start teaching. So here we have a couple of examples of one of our lesson plans. If you look on the left side of the screen, you'll see the CALLA thematic unit plan, and you'll see highlighted, it says lesson 4 reading. So what that means is we know that we are on the 4th lesson plan of this thematic unit. Reading is going to be the skill that we are focusing on. It's your reading skill. It's the language domain. Also, if you look on the top right side of that image, you'll see the date. That's really important because you need to know when are you going to be doing these lessons plans. Also, you have your unit theme. You need to know what theme you are having for this whole time for each lesson plan. It needs to be reflecting on that theme. You have your lesson topic, which is how to read a recipe, and you're going to be doing a recipe book. Then you have your TESOL standards. So your TESOL standards are the national standards that are required for English language learners. These are going to guide you in your lesson plans and your objectives. Next, you have your WIDA standard. Your WIDA standard are the state standards for English language learners. So it's really important to know where to find these, that you need to have these, and these need to be incorporated into your lesson plans. Again, that's going to set up your whole lesson plan. Everything should be based off of those standards. So next you have your goal, which is your general overall, what do you want to accomplish in this class time? Then you have your objectives. As Akila mentioned, there are 3 different types. You have your cognitive, linguistic, and socioaffective, and you can read there and see the differences between those objectives. They need to be very specific, and typically when you write your objective, you should have it with students will be able to or the SWBAT. If you look on the right side, on the right image, you'll see the materials listed. You'll see that we have them bullet pointed. That's just so you can look at that ahead of time. It's really easy to understand, to grasp, to know, okay, these are the materials that I need. You don't have to take a long time reading through. Then you have your assessment, and so you know you're going to have your reading comprehension quiz. This helps the teacher know that you are going to have your quiz ahead, have it available ahead of time. Lastly, you'll see that the time, there's 2 days of 45-minute lessons. So with this being said, the timing may not always be the exact same as you have it on your lesson plan. So we have allowed 45 minutes for these students to learn each part, each half of this lesson plan. Some students may grasp it really quickly and others may not. So you really have to be flexible in how you allow the lesson to flow. Another example is the instructions. So as we had mentioned before, they need to be very, very specific. So we have here day 1. So we know that these instructions are specific to the first day of teaching this lesson plan. We have them numbered, and then we have the subsets underneath the numbers. So for example, if you look at step 1, it says begin class with a 5-minute recap of your previous class. You could do a 5-minute recap through so many different ways. So that's why we had to be very specific, and we said ask the students something that they learned from the last class regarding ordering from a menu. So make sure that your steps are very, very specific. You need to make sure that if somebody were to come into your classroom, they didn't know what you were doing beforehand, they might not even understand the topic, but they know how to present it to the students based off of your instructions. Lastly, here are a couple of things to remember. So it's really important to remember that the class time to finish the lesson plans may not always go according to how you've them planned. Again, this is because some students go faster, some students go slower, and sometimes you'll have a specific class that they go really fast, and then you'll have another class, and you know it's going to take slower. So you need to be flexible with your time. Teaching in itself needs to be flexible because learning is not fixed. Not every student learns the same way. Not every class learns the same way. If students are having a hard time grasping that concept, you need to take a step back and you need to think what might be causing the issue. There could be a number of things. There could be some situations going on in their home life that are causing them to not pay attention, that are causing them stress and not performing well. There could be a comprehension problem. Maybe they're not understanding what you're teaching. Do they just need extra time? Students sometimes just need more time to comprehend, especially English language learners. Another thing that could be causing them to have a difficult time is, do the teaching strategies need to be modified? This is so important because sometimes we think as teachers we know the exact thing to teach them and we think it's going to work so well, but when teaching you'll see that your students aren't fully understanding. And lastly, just enjoy your time with your students, get to know them, build that relationship with them. Building a relationship really creates a strong foundation in the classroom. It helps your students become more comfortable with you and with one another, and it engages them. It allows them to feel comfortable enough to engage in the classroom and engage in learning in itself. So this concludes our presentation on how we wrote our CALLA lesson plans. Just as you write your own CALLA lesson plan, just remember those 5 parts of the procedures and just remember to be flexible.